Questions Friday. This is Greg Herrman with Herrman Herrman. Before we get started, I want to remind everybody that we have adopted the Zavala Elementary School, and we will be giving office school supplies to them. And we're going to double whatever anybody brings to our office. So if anybody wants to come by our office at 1201 3rd Street in Corpus and drop off school supplies, the firm will match those, and we're going to give them to the children that still don't have school supplies when school starts at Zavala. When you come by, you can enter to win a family of 4 of Schlitter Bond tickets, and that is going to end August 18th. So be sure and get your school supplies in before that and enter the contest, and the winner will be announced on Monday, August 21st. Okay, time for FAQs. The first one comes from a Michael Garcia. And the question is, if there is a multi-car pileup accident, like on a busy highway, who is responsible for what? And of course, the answer there obviously, depends on, what started the accident, what was the initial cause, and what chain of events happened. So everyone's going to be different, but as a general rule, you have to keep in mind that you are supposed to keep a safe distance behind the car ahead of you. So even if the first car wipes out, if other people just keep running into that accident, pretty much everybody that hits it's going to be at fault, because you're supposed to stay back far enough that when things like that happen and there's a wreck or something in front of you, you have time to put on your brakes and not hit it. As a general, as a rule of thumb, you're supposed to stay 1 car length for every 10 miles an hour behind the car ahead of you. So if the car ahead of you is going 10 miles an hour, you ought to be a car length behind it. If it's going 60 miles an hour, you ought to be 6 car lengths back. And that should give you enough time to put on your brakes and avoid the collision. So, again, it depends on all the facts and circumstances, but if it's just a pileup where one car after another just keeps running into the people ahead of it, it's generally going to be that everybody's fault who does the running into. Even if there's fog or something on the road, if it's that foggy, you shouldn't be driving in the first place. You ought to pull over, or you should be driving slow enough so that if something appears ahead of you, you won't run into it. And again, those are general rules of thumb. It depends on the facts and circumstances. So, I guess if you have a specific thing in mind, that we could certainly give you advice about that. But without knowing more, that's kind of the general answer. Question number 2 comes from Jacqueline Thomas, and she asks, if you turn out of a driveway and get hit by a car that was speeding, is it your fault? There would have been time for me to go if the other person wasn't speeding. Well, I would say, Jacqueline, the answer there is that, yeah, it's probably your fault, at least partly. The other car should not have been speeding. The jury would put some fault on that person for speeding, but you shouldn't have pulled out of the driveway if you saw this car speeding. And if you saw the car, before you go and you turn out, you should have been able to gauge the speed of this car, and you should have said, hey, that car's going too fast, I can't make it, so I'm not going to go. There again, it just depends on the facts, depends on the circumstances. Were there things in your way blocking your visibility or the other person's visibility? It just kind of all depends. But as a general rule of thumb, if you see another vehicle coming down the road, you should not be pulling out unless, unless you can safely do it. Okay, question number 3 comes from Ricardo Ortiz. If multiple people are in a car and the car gets hit by someone and everyone becomes injured, do all the passengers and driver have the same case, or is each a separate case? So I think the answer there, Ricardo, is kind of both. Everybody's going to have different injuries, so you're going to have a different case to that extent. One person may have a broken arm and Another person may have an injured back or neck. So your injuries are different and they're separate, but your cause of action against whoever hit you is going to be the same. The problem is that in most of these cases, the insurance company or the defense lawyer is always going to blame the driver of your vehicle and say he should have done something different. He shouldn't have been going so fast or so slow, or he should have taken better evasive action. So pretty much unless the driver of your vehicle is rear-ended and there's no dispute about it, then the driver's going to have a different case than everybody else because he could be partly at fault. And what that also does is that creates a conflict of interest between the passengers and the driver, because if the other side's going to claim, hey, the driver was partly at fault, and you're going to say present a claim or end up having to file a lawsuit, you're going to have to include that driver probably, just in case the jury comes back and says, yeah, it is partly that driver's fault. If you want to get a full recovery, you're going to have to include that driver in your lawsuit. So let's say a jury comes back and says, yeah, we think the driver of your car was at fault. Not a lot, maybe 10% or 15 or 20%, but he was still partly at fault. If you didn't name that driver in your lawsuit and you go to trial and the jury finds he's 20% at fault and you didn't name him, then whatever you recover as far as damages is going to be reduced by that 20% because you failed to include that driver in your lawsuit. So, everybody's kind of got the same case as far as damages, but as far as liability, the passengers are in different positions than the driver. So I hope that explains everything. If not, message us or post on our Facebook wall or send us an email and we can try to explain it further. The next 2 weeks I will not be in the office, so sorry to disappoint everybody, but we won't be having FAQs next Friday, the following Friday, but we will be back on August 25th. So unless I have any announcements to make, then I will see you guys back on August 25th. Thanks for attending.